Hi, welcome to the School Community Huddle with Ana Martinez. Today we are focusing on kindergarten, the most anticipated one of the season. I'm so excited to have our two special guests today. If you all can introduce yourself, your name, the number of years of experience, and positions or grade levels you've taught or held.
I'm Carissa DeSalles. I'm currently teaching in New Orleans, and I've been teaching for about 7 years now. And I've gone through teaching art to teaching after school and currently kindergarten.
Nice.
And I'm Austin Salomeyer. I'm the Dean of Instruction in Los Angeles. I've taught second grade, third grade, some first grade, a little stint in kinder, and I currently coach teachers in TK through 6.
Great. I'm so excited. I think the most questions that I get in my DMs, in my text messages, phone calls from family and friends is kindergarten. It is such a beautiful, anticipated age. It's usually the youngest person in the family or the only child. And so families are like, oh my gosh, this is how they're going to get their first educational experience. So let's start off first with my story. I always start off with a story. And my story is when I went to school. And I started school in kindergarten. I wasn't lucky enough to start in pre-K. I remember feeling so excited and so nervous at the same time. I'm the fourth child of 8. I remember my mom walking us to school in Hawthorne at the time and walking me in. And then like the day before, my brother and sister were like, it's okay if you cry and make sure you raise your hand, and like coaching me on the things I needed to know. And my mom was like, how are you feeling? And then I remember turning around and saying, I'm good. Like, you can go home now. But seeing other kids cry, but my mom was like, you like kicked me out of the classroom. I was just like, wow. So I now being a principal or an educator for 17 years, I've seen the different responses of kids. So like, what responses have you seen from kindergarten, and like, how have you like either coached teachers or managed some of that scariness and excitement at the beginning of their kindergarten experience?
I definitely think that when kids come into kindergarten, it's the parents that are more afraid than the children. Like, the children are just like amazed at all the like fun tools and resources that the classroom, and they just want to like dive right in. And that's usually like the exciting part. Like, kids want to play, they want to have fun, they want to learn, like they're just naturally curious. But definitely it's always parents like, I'm leaving my baby for the first time. It's like just reassuring them that like, it's an honor to have them, and we're gonna take care of them. We're like their second mom. So virtually, I think it's gonna be a harder learning curve this year for kindergarten. They're gonna be by themselves on the computer with their class.
Yeah, definitely different.
Yeah. I'm thinking about like coaching a teacher before, and it was like the first day of kindergarten, and she entered her room, and it was like, she looked at me and she went, I've never taught. And they've never been in school. And it was like, oh, wonderful. You're having your first moment together. But I think exactly what Carissa said, like, they're so excited to learn. And they automatically, and the nicest thing about kindergarten is they love their teacher. So that should always be number one. Like, they love you, create joy, have fun. And then I think too, like for that virtual world, like, how are you going to create joy and have fun on that first day? Maybe it's like having a digital science experiment, or asking them to get some vinegar and baking soda out of their cupboard and watch what happens. So how can we keep having fun experiences?
Right. Kindergarten is definitely a transition of like, let's love school. It's the foundation of a love for school. And I appreciate you saying that. I want to know about 5-year-olds. So usually a kindergartner is 4, 5, maybe on the latter end of 5. What are some of the characteristics that you would say are typical of a kindergartner or a 4 or 5-year-old that's entering kindergarten?
They love to talk. You give them a question or ask them about themselves, and they will go on forever, which is great. It means they have a lot to say. I love the conversations. Like a lot of people say like conversations with kindergartners are very like basic, but they have a ton to say. They're so curious about everything. And I think the best question they ask is like, why? Because it actually pushes you as a teacher to like find a response to what they're saying and engages them. So, but they love to talk. They're so playful and they're kind. They are just naturally kind kids, and they want to give you love and they want to make you happy. And I think you can definitely do a lot of teaching just based off that.
Mm.
I know a woman says that kindergarteners are smarter than you are. And I think that that is totally true. Like how fast their brains are firing and their synapses are going are impressive and amazing. So they're always like looking to make connections, so inquisitive, just like you said, asking why. And I think too, they really love to play. Sometimes it's not always like it's parallel play, not always like with their friends, but they just love to have fun and love to learn through play.
Love that you said learning through play. Let's talk about that. So I think what people don't know, or maybe they do know, is that, like you said, they're playful and they're coming, some of them, it's their first schooling experience. And even if they did go to a preschool or a TK, they did a lot of play, a lot of collaboration, a lot of social interaction because you're teaching them how to be with others, right? And so let's talk about what it means to learn through play. What does that mean? Let's start off with something I think that we all know about, math. How do you learn through play with math?
Well, we always start off with like guided discovery and we give them tools. So like even like cubes, or you could use Legos at home if your kids have them. And basically we allow them to just like, here's some tools. We call them tools, not toys. And we say like, what can you do with it? And again, like kids are naturally problem solvers and can figure out a way of doing things by just giving them the manipulatives. And so like, for example, they'll be like, we can stack them. Okay, if we stack them, what else can we do with them? Well, we can count them now. And so that's kind of like the learning through play method. And like, I would say if like you're at home with kids, the Dollar Tree is your best friend. It is the teacher's like gift. But like, I have an ice cube tray, put some numbers in there, give them some beans, let them play with them, figure out like how many to put in. But like little things like that, just give them tools and then let them play and figure out like make sense of numbers, make sense of counting.
Everything that you do in your house could be connected to it. So if you're cooking, asking those same questions, how much, how many, how much more are we going to do? And just engaging with like the language of mathematics in like the daily routines that you're doing and making them fun. Like cooking is fun. Taking a walk can be fun. Picking up random stones that you find on the street, like that can be mathematics.
Right. You said that you're asking questions, how much, how many. So I think when we think of kindergarten, we think, oh, so simple. Like they just need to know the numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, they do need to know the sequence of the numbers. However, they have to know the conceptual piece, which is what Carissa was showing us. Like they learn the one-to-one, like this is one pen, one bean, one chair. So they're learning that a number is not just like this abstract thing. It's actually an amount, right? And then when you ask them a question, how much, how many, now you're pushing them in the application piece so that they're quantifying it. And you're like, whoa, that's really hard. But at their level, that makes sense. How much is that? How many are those? And you're teaching them how to say what we would say is like a math sentence, right? Because eventually they're going to see word problems, and the way we ask them now in their foundation kind of sets the tone for that. So what are some of the resources that you've asked parents or that you utilized, right? Because a lot of you all were in virtual learning in the spring, to have the home environment. Like what are some of the instructional strategies you might have used?
Well, for one, so we're going into virtual learning right now. And so we created boards. I'll show you. It's and Dollar Tree is your best friend. So it's just a board. And this is literally, it unfolds. And it has, on this side, just counting numbers. So like while they're doing their work, or if they have like, say their teacher is doing something else or like helping another breakout room, they can literally be counting 1 to 1. They can be working on their colors, they can be working on their shapes, but it's all on the board, or they can easily reference it. And part of the hardest thing I think about virtual learning is staying focused for a 5-year-old. This is like creating their own little desk. It's like their own little cubby, and kids like things when it's personalized for them. So like let them create their own board and have like the numbers and stuff, and like let them make it. And that kind of also gives them a little independence.
I think one thing too that's just like an easy piece is like get post-it notes or get index cards and have your kids start like labeling the environmental print in your house. So that's like easy for them, right? And if they don't know, like that can also be a whole activity where you like spell it like chair. And that can be something you do in English and Spanish or any language that you speak at home. And then I think once you get in the practice of like identifying language, and it being something that you talk about with your kids and you, it'll make it easier to be like, oh, these questions are like inherent. Like you don't have to think too hard about them. I think too, just like, I told my sister, I was like, cause she has a kindergartner and a 4-year-old. But like, just think of the girls as like an apprenticeship to you. Like you do math, reading and writing every single day as a human being. Just point it out to them. And I think too, sometimes school strips the context from learning, but this is a chance for kids to remember that we read and write and do math, like as we live. So just celebrate that.
Let's celebrate that. Like let's learn in context. And I appreciate that. And a fun game that I learned from the first grade teachers that I interviewed was a scavenger hunt. So if you're a teacher listening or a parent or a caregiver, a scavenger hunt, because in kindergarten, it's about identifying colors, numbers, amounts. So you could say, go find an object that's green. Go find an object that's orange. So now you're making it interactive. Or go find 2 objects. So they have to learn like 1, 2. And the reason that you're doing it fun scavenger hunt is because, like Carissa said, they're 5. They need to move around. They can't sit still. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about their stamina in September and in August. Like, how long can a student that's 4 or 5 years old actually sit still and like give it to anything?
And when you're in the classroom teaching your first month to 2 months, you're like praying that they're able to hold attention for 5 minutes. After that, you are up, you're doing a chant, you're doing a cheer, you're doing some sort of exercise to get them engaged, give them a little like refresh, and then you're back at it for 5 minutes. So to sit in front of a computer and look at your teacher and and like redirect you in person, it's a lot harder. So I think teachers and parents really need to keep that in mind. And easy ways to do that, gonoodle.com has all these free little exercises, and it ranges from like kindergarten level all the way up to high school, and it has yoga, it has meditation, it has like indoor recess, all of these different movements. That was one of my best friends. Also, like if there's, I think it's called Nearpod, but it has interactive tools that you can build into your lesson. So like kids can draw on it, they can play like games and stuff like that. So that's also cool. But what you were touching on with scavenger hunts, definitely my kids last year loved them. And you can build that into like phonetics. So like saying like, bring me back something that starts with a T. Remember, T goes, t, t, bring me back something. And they'll bring you back like, not a table. They would not bring you back a table, but that's an example. But definitely fun things. You can play Simon Says if you're going over like first day rules. Simon Says, raise your hand. And like you're just practicing the movements that you want them to see over virtual learning, but it's allowing them time. They think they're playing, you're reinforcing habits.
The other thing I'd just say too, Chris is, I'm sure, a bomb kindergarten teacher. And when I was watching our kindergarten teachers on Zoom in the spring, I think a lot of the kids were like hopping up and down or standing or like moving something. And like that didn't bother the teachers, right? But I think that was like, the parents were like, sit down. But it's like, in the classroom, I think our teachers are really accustomed to like, is that my problem or is that their problem? And if they're listening and moving around, it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I shake my leg when I'm listening sometimes, or like tap my pen. And so we all are different types of listeners. So you can always know if a student's listening by like saying, well, what did you just learn? And if they can repeat it or if they can tell you something about it, that means they were listening. And I like this idea of, and people don't realize this, or maybe they do because they loved kindergarten, songs, chants, fun, right? So they don't know how many songs and how many chants are in a kindergarten day. Like, Carissa, I'm sure you know every single kindergarten song, like for every single thing from like, good morning, like there's a song for everything. So I just wonder, are there songs that and where can they find songs or chants that they can use at home so that either they can get them to wake up or get them in the mood of a kindergarten classroom?
I believe there's some, just if you just Google like kindergarten cheers, and then there's definitely some that I just make up. Like in the moment, you just have to go with the flow. Like I remember when it was raining one time and kids, it was a bad storm in New Orleans and kids were freaking out. And I made up like the silent rain cheer where like no one's talking, but we're making rain. Like we start with the wind and then it turns into like light rain and then it turns into a thunderstorm. And like, it's movement, but kids are engaged. But like, if you walk into a kindergarten classroom, it's a concert all day, and that's how you're learning. So.
Yeah, me too. I think there's students who learn musically, right? And so if you give them a song, maybe remotely they're like A, B, or whatnot. But if you give them a chant or something to anything, and believe me, there's out there. If you YouTube it or Google it, there's something out there for everyone. Or pay attention to the kindergarten teacher, and next thing you know, your 5-year-old singing it in the shower, and they're learning it, right? So I really appreciate that. I want to transition us into sticking to math, actually. What are some of the beginning math standards or learnings that you are doing or you want students to learn in August or September?
We mentioned it earlier, but like counting 1 to 1. Identifying numbers 1 through 20, writing numbers 1 through 20, asking how many or answering how many, and remember being able to retain that like if you count something and you say I moved them, it's still going to be the same number. So like retaining that I can put in a different arrangement, but if I'm not taking anything away or not adding, it's staying the same, which is a really hard concept. Like, of course, like as adults, we're like, duh. But for a kindergartner, you see it move, you're just like, let me recount. So the conservation of that number is a very hard skill, and then one day it'll just click for them. But definitely practicing that, and also you can start counting in different arrangements. So like starting with a single, and then going to like a circle or a scattered arrangement. So I would focus on those, but definitely just number recognition. Like that's my main focus: number recognition, orally counting, and 1 to 1.
I love that. And I love the board that you showed. I think that's great. You have now a tool, and students get so excited if they have the same thing their teacher has. So if ask the teacher for that resource so that you can print it out or have it at home, or ask them to print it out for you and you'll pick it up somewhere. Because if you put it up on the wall somewhere, then the kid's like, I have that too. And like it creates an association and builds community, right? So maybe trying that out. I really appreciate that. Let's transition to reading now. So when we think about reading in the beginning of the year, September and August, what are some of the foundational things that you're doing with kindergarten, or we expect to be doing with kindergarten?
We're learning our alphabet and our sounds, how to write our names. That's basically like our focus. I know like some schools, so our school, I guess has a separate curriculum for reading comprehension versus like phonics. So phonics is our main push for kindergarten. Start with flashcards. I know like a lot of parents will give the whole alphabet, but it's for kindergarten, it's actually really beneficial if you like break it up into 3 and start with 3 letters, use flashcards until those kids have mastered it. And by mastering it, I mean like it should be as fluent as knowing your name. So if someone asks you like, what's your name? You should be able to answer that quickly. So that's when you know like the student actually knows the letter. And then once they've mastered those 3, give them another 3 more. And same with the sounds. If you know or if you realize like your student's struggling with the sounds, then maybe just back it up, stay with those 3, then add 1 more. In terms of writing, the fatter the pencil, the better. So if you don't have like those fat pencils, which are also at the Dollar Tree, you can use like a fat crayon. Actually, smaller and fatter are really great. Also, Amazon has really great pencil grips. They kind of look like alligator heads, but if you just Google it, pencil grips for kindergarten, it shows kids where to put in their fingers, and it does wonders in the classroom.
Yeah.
And just the other piece, if you're home with your kids, or you're driving home, like just talking about the letters they see in signs, letters in their names. And again, like if you're labeling things in the house, like let's find some things that start with the B sound, and going through, and that can be something you do. And then the only piece I'd say too, for our families that speak a language other than English, like you can still practice that. Find something with the B sound. And that's still practicing the skill of how you hear that sound, right? And that is the skill that we want kids to get. So it doesn't matter if you speak English or not, like encourage folks to practice in the language that is they're most comfortable with.
I wonder I see some parents going out and buying on Amazon the entire alphabet and putting it on their wall and like, oh, that's the alphabet. And like, think about me giving you an entire whatever that you're learning for the first time. Like maybe you think that for a 5-year-old it's not overwhelming, but it is, which is why I think it's important. Like Chris has said, if you do have the entire strip, you're not wrong for doing that. You can either cut it up and put it up at a time once they've mastered it, or cover the rest and only think about the 3 that they're learning. And then like we're only focusing on A, B, and C, or letter. So I'm hearing letter name and letter sounds. And then what I heard from Austin is like, use your environment. Like there's print everywhere in our home, outside of our home, so that now we're using that in context. Something about motor skills, about how they're holding their pen. So let's talk about what motor skills is for kindergarten. What is it? What do we mean by motor skills in kindergarten? And how do we begin working with them in kindergarten in August and September?
Well, our main focus for motor skills is basically like pencil holding. Later, we slowly transition into like using scissors. And there's a whole bunch of other techniques that you can use that kids love for fine motor skills. One of my favorites is you get like a tub and you can fill it with rocks maybe like this size. And then you get chopsticks. And on the top of the chopsticks, it has like, I don't even know what it's called, but it attaches the chopsticks so they don't completely separate. But the kids have to pull out the rocks with the chopsticks, and it's just working on the dexterity of their fingers. So they're able to manipulate objects, so it strengthens it. But it's really great for, again, writing. And at the kindergarten level, like, do not worry about the size of your child's writing. I would more focus like on the formation of like the letters and like how they're actually gripping the pencil.
Do you have any tips for how they can do? Oh, go ahead. You were going to say something. I was just going to say, do you have any tips? Because I know you do it at your school. Any tips for how we can make the fine motor skills practices fun or engaging in their environment at home?
So our teachers, we have like playtime, right? They call it cooperation time, learn through play, but they make sort of like what Chris was saying, like getting chopsticks, getting like tweezers in a lot of different colors. And then it can also be, you mix up a bunch of things. So it can become a sorting activity like beans, rocks, tiny beads, and then sorting them. And it can also practice the dexterity of picking it up. And then the other thing I've seen, and this is just our teachers did it, having like that was fine motor, but there's also gross motor. So getting plastic beach balls and like trying to throw them into like just empty buckets, or throw them between one another to work on hand-eye coordination. And the other one I've also seen, and this blends it, is like walking upstairs, because with kindergartners, sometimes you get the 1 foot goes to both steps, 1 foot goes to both steps. So practicing walking upstairs one by one and then counting.
Yeah, I completely forgot that those are the skills that you're working on. And parents were doing them intentionally, and we take them for granted because we do them every day. And we don't realize, like, oh, they have to learn how to grip a pencil or how to grip something and use these fine motor skills, right? Whatever hand they use to write. And I appreciate also like the gross motor skills for like the larger things, and jumping, skipping and counting, like associating that, right? It's all coming back to me on when I would observe my kindergartners playing and learning. I really appreciate that. Okay, let's transition into writing. Well, before that, how many minutes a day would we recommend? I know we should always ask the teacher what the teacher recommends, but would you recommend that they work on fine motor skills or gross motor skills?
It's embedded into our schedule so naturally, so I don't like having a lot of time. Like, I know for their writing at school in the beginning of the year, we work on it in like 15-minute blocks, but we'll break it up into like 5 minutes and do like a pause and do something fun and then come back to it. I would probably do the same at home. Like, you could, but give them different activities, even if it is like coloring for like 5 minutes and then switching to like, now we're going to do some name writing, and now we're going to do like some exercise, and like what Austin said with the ball, like rolling the ball back and forth and everything, and make it into a game. Like, I bet if you can roll it into my legs 5 times, like, you get a sticker or you get something fun that they like. So
yeah, I love that. I also think about, that makes me think about just schedules in kindergarten. First, what should they do first when getting schedules for their 5-year-old? And what does a schedule include for kindergarten? What should they be expecting?
So for the schedule, it should be provided by their teacher. If not, I'm sure the teacher has one on plan, but you should either follow that, or if there isn't a schedule and like the lessons, like you can walk out the day, I would keep your kids on a consistent schedule and try and mirror it to school, so that if you are to return to school, they're still kind of staying on the same schedule and it's not like a shock of routines. So like for our schedule, for example, we start off with a morning meeting, which is like kind of a community builder, where it can be like a show and tell or just a fun activity to get everybody engaged and get excited for the lesson. Then we'll have reading. They'll have independent work for reading. We'll take a break where they can get water. Maybe they need to walk around. We'll come back. They'll do math. They'll have independent math time. And then I have check-ins with them. So I'll pick individual kids and check in with them on a daily basis.
The thing I'd add is if you don't have a schedule from your school's teacher, yes, ask for one. I would just make it a collaborative process with them. So I'd say, like, just like Chris has said, so name all those things. We have reading to do, we've got math to do, we've got writing to do. We're going to have play time. And talk to the kids about that, and then have them, it could be on index cards, post-it notes, like draw or write those things, and then make it a collaborative process where you're like, what works for you? Like, because we're home now, right? That's different. And then design it with them. And I, just like Chris said, make it consistent. And then if it's failing after a couple weeks, maybe you need to switch some things up, and that's okay. And then the last piece, just because I'm sure we have a lot of working parents, is when you go into a kindergarten classroom, the teacher will have like 30 students sometimes, and they will have like a crown on or a necklace, and it signifies like you can't come up and talk to the teacher right now because that teacher is working with another student. And I think just normalize that for yourself and for kids at home. I think as parents, it's really hard because you always want to be present. Like, a teacher is not always 100% present for 100% of students always. So normalize with them, like when mom or dad or auntie or grandma has like the signifier on, like she's not open for business. And maybe it's just a 5-minute period, but make that normalized for your kids.
Both of you are amazing individuals. And I just it made me think about let's talk about that implicit learning that we don't talk about for kindergartners. One, they're coming into terms that there are other people in their world, right? Because they only think of them, right? And it's not in this like, oh, selfish, like they only think of them. It's like their brain can only at 5 and at 4 realize like their own needs. They don't know and have an awareness of other people's needs, especially if they're the youngest, if they're the only child. If they are like an older sibling, they might have some of that. And we've seen that at a very young age, a really like advanced emotional intelligence with some 5-year-olds. But parents, if you've ever seen your child seeing you have a conversation or seeing you in the bathroom or seeing you do something very important and be like, mom, 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 it's because whatever they're feeling is the most important thing in the world. Right? Like, am I right, kindergarten teachers? Like, you get 30 of them. You get 23 of them. And Mr. Saddlemeyer, like, this is why kindergarten teachers are the most calm, like, fun people, because they have to have patience to be like, friend, right now, I am talking to these friends, and I'm helping them with a really big emergency. I know that what you're doing is really important, or you want to tell me is really important, but you got to wait your turn. So there's, like, awaiting your turn, but there's also like you got to teach them explicitly that there are other people in their world. Am I on the right track here? Is there anything else like that social emotionally that kids are being taught or are learning in kindergarten in August and September, aside from like there's other people in this world and like let's take our turn and let's understand other people's feelings? Is there anything else like that?
We definitely teach them in the beginning stages. We teach them how to read facial expressions and how to match it with an emotion. For example, like one of them is like the person's eyebrows were like furrowed and like they're like had a pouty look, and they're like, what emotion do you think it is? Is it happy? Is it sad? Or is it angry? And then they would have to like learn to identify it and match it. So doing those things, and then also giving them the sentence stem, like instead of like I'm going to throw a tantrum or I'm going to like be silent or I'm just going to shut down, using like I feel, and then they choose one, and providing a visual for it too, because kids are not going to remember like the words or like even the sentence stem, but like, and then using it throughout your day. Like even if you are feeling a certain way, you use that stem and like mirror it for them.
Yeah, I love that, what you just said, because I think that's the genius of kindergarten teachers. So if you're a parent, like kindergarten teachers are always modeling and narrating what's going on in their brain. They're like, I feel sad right now. I'm happy now. I'm doing this right now to like help myself. And I think normalizing that again for you and your kids of saying like what you're at and what you're doing and how you're responding to that emotion is really helpful.
I appreciate that. I appreciate your patience, Carissa. I'm so excited to see your kindergarten class this fall. And I like the idea of like looking at a face and like, what does it mean? Do you teach too, like what to do with the face? Like, what do you do when someone's frustrated or angry? How do you teach that in your class?
Yeah, so we actually have a curriculum that's called PASS, and basically it goes through steps, and you teach it you teach it every day, or you try and incorporate it into your morning meetings every day, but then there's a specific time slot that we would like focus on it on Wednesdays. But basically it goes through, they learn a process of like what to do if you make a mistake, or if you do hurt someone's feelings or your feelings are hurt, like how do you approach the person who wronged you? But basically they ask the questions like, how can I make it better? When they go through like a series of steps, first they acknowledge how they're feeling. So instead of shutting down, they'll take a minute, like, do I need to take a minute and go by myself before I approach the person or the situation? And then it could look like, hey, Anna, you took my pencil and it made me feel mad. And then you would respond with like, I'm sorry, or like, I didn't know you were using it. And then they come up with basically a way to like how can I make this better? So one, it could be like, you could give me back my pencil, or we can share. And then it could go with where they resolve the situation, or it's just like, would you like a handshake, a hug, or a high five, or nothing? Some kids don't want anything. So, and then that's kind of like the smaller processes that we would use to like start them on their way of like solving their own problems. But like at the same time, you also say like, if it's a big deal, then you come to it. But you could use those at home for when you and your siblings aren't getting along.
Wow, so good, so good. Anything you want to add to that, Austin?
The only thing I was thinking that I think happens in schools is there's normally like that morning circle and that like end of the day circle. Just a simple check-in question. And that helps like build trust in relationships, which is like the foundation of conflict resolution. I also think too, if you're home with kids, just like checking in with them, and maybe not just twice a day, but a few times a day, and normalize if things are not okay, that you are going to talk about it and see what we can do to improve. And that also gives you, if you make it a routine, a chance to be like, and I also want to talk about what happened this morning.
I think one of the things you coach teachers on, which I think would be relevant for parents right now, is you're a human being. You're going through your own stress. You're going through your own emotions, especially given the global pandemic, right? So especially a first and second year kindergarten teacher, they might get upset or triggered or sad by a student's behavior. One, it's not personal, like at all. But two, I'm wondering, like, just like you would coach a teacher, how would you, or what advice would you give a parent that is being triggered by their own child's behavior or the child that they're giving care to's behavior because they're not listening? They're saying, no, I don't want to do that. You know, they're going off of what they feel, which is normal, but like how would you coach a teacher and what tips would you give a parent?
I would say variation, like try different approaches. I think we use this in the classroom. If something does not work or it's not making a change, try something else. Like, don't be afraid of like failing and then trying to make this work. If it's not working, it's not working. And then try a different incentives approach. And also like what I do is I track behaviors. So if at a certain time I've noticed like this child is getting restless and is talking back at this certain time, like let me try, maybe he needs a snack at this time, and seeing if it's at a certain time, or maybe this is the time where he just needs to take a 5-minute nap. But definitely like tracking behaviors might be beneficial.
Wow, that's good.
I think too, just asking, like, trying to figure out antecedents, like what happened before that like is leading up to this. When we have students who run out of the classroom, like they're running out of the classroom for a reason, right? And we want to figure out why that's happening. And I think having a conversation with them, but just like Krista said, like tracking behaviors, like what happened before, like what led up to it, can be really helpful. I'd also say, like, if you're a parent and you're doing this, take care of yourself, even when it's the last thing you can do right now. I know in California, we're at least in Los Angeles, we're going to be in distance learning till October. So I think it's important in the long haul to like take care of yourself, and then to figure out what are like the triggers. And I know like we had a lot of runners in kinder last year, and then we realized that, well, we're going to start the day actually in play. Like we're going to have music coming on, and that's going to be the first thing they do because they love to play. And it stopped running out of the room. And that wasn't like, once we just stopped to ask why it was happening, teachers have their own solutions. Like your child, you have the solutions. You just need to stop and pause and ask why.
Just adding off that last part, kids will also respond better if they are included in the solution problem. like to the problem. So if they are having difficulty staying in the class, be like, well, what do you need to stay in the class? Or like, if you stay in the class for this amount of days, like, what do you think your reward should be? And then you can start with like a material reward, like say they want a bag of chips, and then slowly just gradually like, okay, well, if you do this, then maybe you get like 15 extra minutes of staying up to read at night or something that they want to do. And if they're more invested in it, they're more likely to follow like your behavior plan.
You're so wise, Krista. What you're saying makes me think about student agency. And I think when especially if it's your own child, you're like, they're only 5. Or you might be like, they're a grown 5 because they're the oldest of the other babies. I don't know, depending on how you view them. But regardless of that, how do we build agency and independence in a 5-year-old at home, right? So like maybe you do everything for them. Bath time, reading time, brushing their teeth, waking them up, their laundry, all of that. How can a parent already begin to create some of that agency or independence in their 5-year-old?
If you walk into a kindergarten classroom, you will see a job chart. That is, kids love that. They will sit up straight and wait for their name to be called to be put on that job chart. Give them jobs at home. And don't say like that they're chores, but be like, you are in charge of this. This is all you, boo. Like, when it's time for bath, it's your turn to pour in those bubbles. Remember to keep it into like only this amount. But like you can, in terms of like their schedule, like how Austin had said, like have them make those note cards and that's their schedule. Like, what do you want to do next? Put it on a Velcro so that they have to move, like take out a little picture of them, put Velcro on the picture. Okay, when you're ready to move on to reading, you move your face to next to the reading card. So that they're in charge of their own schedule. And it's like, treat them like not necessarily like little adults, but like treat them like little people that are capable of it. And they'll rise to the occasion. They are very independent people and they love helping.
Love that. Love that. And why not call them chores? I've never heard that before. Why not?
I just feel, or like in the classroom, like when I say like it's a chore or something, it just has a very negative context. Whereas like when you say like this is your job, it's kind of like a leadership role and you want to like build them up and use that vocabulary. Like I only pick leaders to be like in charge of something. So you need to show me leadership skills. What does that look like? And then you're having those conversations. Like when I think of a leader, I see someone who isn't afraid to say what they want or like what they need, and you're building those habits.
I love that. And so also independence of like buckling their own pants, putting their own clothes, beginning to learn to tie their shoes and brush their teeth. Like there's other things too, right, that they can build independence on because the teacher can't do that actually for them in the classroom. So let's close it out with ReadAlouds, right? So what advice would you give to families on ReadAlouds and why are they important to do with their child?
They're the most fun thing ever. Like, it's the one time where you have all 30 kids with rapt attention, like staring. Read aloud is when you read aloud to your child and ask questions. I think the beauty of them is that stories are amazing. Kids love stories. And our brain learns best by storytelling. And that's cross-cultural. The other awesome thing about storytelling and read aloud is that you can touch on a lot of topics, I feel. So I would like, for instance, with everything going on, there's a great book for children called like Something Happened in Our Town about a white boy or about a white girl and a black boy. It talks about like the racial violence and protests that are happening. So you can also tackle some pretty deep topics with kids when they have questions, when you're not exactly sure of how you can engage with it. And then the last piece too, I'd say like vocabulary building, the conversations you have, the language involved with them is amazing. And again, a plug, no matter what language you speak, like read to them in that language, because those skills that you're practicing will improve their literacy in English.
Yeah, I think read alouds are definitely one of my favorite part of the day, and definitely the kids, like Austin said. And reading is, so speaking and listening is something that's basically like innate in us. So we're just born listening and speaking, but reading it has to be taught. And so a really big crucial thing at the end of kindergarten that you are testing for to go into first grade is like pacing and fluency, which is like accuracy and expression. And read alouds really help with expression, understanding how to read expression, what does expression mean, but it's also they're hearing how books should be read versus, for example, like I'm not talking like a robot, like I like to play. Like the kids are already learning like it should be read, I like to play and stuff like that. And then also touching like with Austin, like books are so great at bridging conversations or bridging things about like kids. So like my school currently, it's like predominantly African American, but now it's like the demographics are shifting. So now we have more Latino kids, and the language barrier is something that's new to them. So like, for example, I brought my favorite book. This is my absolute favorite book. So I strongly suggest getting it, but it's called Dear Primo. And it's about like a kid in Mexico, and he's writing to his cousin who's in Chicago, I believe. And it builds in like Spanish vocabulary. So like when the cousin's reading the letters, he's like, this is an elote. And like it's talking about it. And it's just like, it's great at bridging. And the other kid's like, well, I play basketball. What do you do over there? And kids can connect to those things. And it's great at building discussion questions and discussion habits. So like, you're facilitating now the kids talking to each other, and it's not necessarily like you're teaching them, but kids now are able to like, this is how you reply to someone without cutting them off and stuff like that. So great conversational habits that occur in read alouds.
I love that. I'm going to get that book. Austin, were you going to say something?
Yeah, and the only thing, I also recognize that for some families, it's a time issue. And so there are some really great resources. If you like Tumble Books, read books out loud to your child. And it's an app or it's a website, so you can read them there. And then Story Online, there are like tons of read alouds you can find. So also don't feel bad if you're like struggling with figuring out time or like making dinner. You can put one on and still engage and listen with your child nearby.
Yeah, your YouTube one also made me think there was a lot of celebrities reading read alouds on YouTube, and instead of having them watch a cartoon, have them watch someone read a book. I love that. Thank you for that resource. So I want you to think about one thing that you want maybe a kindergarten parent to walk away with from this conversation today. As I recap some of the things that I heard, our kindergartners they love to talk and they love to play. And this, for many of them, it's their first time in school. And for some of them, they did go to preschool, and you're probably like, we learned all that. Well, they can continue practicing that. And you can think about where can they build independence, or how can they learn to be more empathetic towards other people's emotions, because they're just living in their world, which is normal for their age. And how do we show them to care and be kinder to others? Include as many songs and chants as possible in their day, right? From good morning to waking up to like the alphabet to numbers to just fun. And then for those parents that are, you already bought the whole alphabet, 3 letters at a time, letter sounds and letter names would be the first 3. Once they master them, then give that to them. And the reason we want to chunk it in those small celebrations is you're building up their esteem during this time as well. And then there was all kinds of great things. Fine motor skills and gross motor skills, like using the tweezers at home, being able to sort things by color, by shape, being able to play and find something in the house as a scavenger hunt, and then read alouds. There's so many read alouds that you can probably access online if you can't read to them at home. And if you only speak Spanish, you can, or your caregiver only speaks Spanish, reading in Spanish is just as good too, because they're learning the foundation of reading as well. Is there anything else you two would want a parent to know from today's conversation or walk away with?
I would just say to all parents, and I tell all my students' parents this during this time, like, this is a very difficult time with the coronavirus, with the Black Lives Matter movements. Like, it's a lot. And you have your child at home now and you are helping them learn. Like, it's okay to be overwhelmed, and it's okay to need to like take a pause. Your teacher is going to be your best friend. Like, reach out to them, let them know how you're feeling, because they're going to try and help you. Like, they are there for your kid. They love your kid as much as you do. So don't be afraid to reach out. Don't be afraid to like feel like you're failing. And if your kid is, I always stress, like, your kid feels what you feel. So if you are stressed, your kid is going to feel that as well. And it's going to reflect in their behavior and their performance. And sometimes things take a little bit longer in kindergarten, and every kid is at a different level. So like, if you're seeing your other child that was reading already at this time or this stage and your child isn't yet, like, just be patient. It comes. Sometimes things just click in kindergarten one day.
You are not alone. Like, your school is here for you. So if you have a question, like, ask, set up a time, and no one knows your children better than you as a parent. And that's what we believe. And if what you're saying is that you need more support from us, then we need to be there to support you. And it's letting the teacher know, letting the principal know, letting the admin team know, and then figuring out what supports are best for all of you.
I love that. Parents, this is just a resource. This is a support. This is so you understand your child as a learner, right? You know them well as a child, but you want to know what is appropriate and what is on grade level for a 5-year-old and for a kindergartner. But just remember, parents, you are enough. Like, what you're doing, what you're going through, have grace with yourself, self-care. I hope that if you at least walk away with one thing today, please don't try all of them. Just try one. Watch this several times, and then put questions in the chat, or reach out to me on Instagram, Ana Martinez _410, and send me questions that you want us to answer or topics you want us to cover, so that I help you help your child, right? Because for you to figure it out by yourself, it's just impossible. Let's all grow together. Let's all grow through this hard time for all of us together. Much love, families. I appreciate you. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time. Bye, families. Bye.